Good evening, everybody. My name is Jury Candelario, Director of APAIT, a Division of Special Service for Groups. Thank you for joining us tonight. Earlier this month, APAIT began a mental health awareness campaign called My Wellness Journey Starts With Me. It featured some of our campaign brand ambassadors, including Laverne Cox and Margaret Cho. Tonight, we continue our campaign with a focus on exploring wellness issues impacting diverse queer men. But first, to talk more about the campaign, I'd like to introduce to you my colleague, Jake Weinrub. Please take it away, Jake.
Thanks so much. As Jerry mentioned, my name is Jake Weinrub, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I currently serve as the Senior Clinical Program Manager at APAIT, Los Angeles. I want to give a special thanks to Jury, Jasmine Creighton, Jimmy Sianipar, and the rest of our management team for helping put this together. I also want to thank our staff at APAIT who have stuck with the agency through a very difficult time and continue to provide incredible essential services to our community members. I know that our clients really appreciate it. So this is the third panel in our series for Mental Health Awareness Month. And really this whole effort was inspired by a speech that actress Laverne Cox gave at the 30th anniversary gala of our OC office last year. Laverne discussed a bit about what was going on in her life at the time and the importance of reaching out. We were able to have Laverne visit our offices. This was pre-COVID or just at the crest of COVID. And she filmed a PSA with us about mental wellness. So I'm gonna switch over and share my screen to play that video now. Laverne, can you tell us about your process seeking mental health services?
So I went to the therapist, and it turns out I needed therapy. Once I got into therapy, I realized that the bullying I experienced as a kid, the emotional abuse, the sexual abuse I had experienced as a child, I hadn't dealt with any of it, that I was in denial about all of it, and that it was affecting me. I thought that I had this elaborate cover. I acted like everything was fine and that I knew everything because I was smart and I thought I was cute. And I was in so much pain that I didn't even know how to deal with. If it weren't for therapy, like the success that has come to me, I would have sabotaged it. Like this is the thing, there are blessings, I think, that the universe has for us. And if we have not done the work to be able to receive those blessings, I believe we'll sabotage them. And so therapy has been crucial for me to be able to feel worthy to receive the blessings that the universe has for me. My quest for wellness starts with me.
Awesome, thanks everyone. So without further ado, I'm gonna introduce our facilitator, James Q. Simmons. James is a board-certified nurse practitioner, on-air medical expert, and doctoral candidate at UCLA. He also holds a Bachelor's of Science in Broadcast Journalism, a Master's of Science in Nursing. He has extensive multimedia hosting expertise and 10 years of hospital-based critical care experience. Earlier this month was National Nurses Week, and James is a proud member of the most trusted profession in America, 18 years running. James has curated the online social media health community Ask the NP, Everything You Were Too Scared to Ask Your MD. This is a safe space in social media where the LGBTQ community can get real, relatable, and reliable information to empower their health. James is currently guest co-host of the nationally syndicated talk radio program Drop the Subject, heard in more than 36 US markets and on the largest LGBTQ radio network, Channel Q. So take it away, James.
Thank you very much, Jake. I really appreciate that. And I just want to thank everyone who has joined the call already and our panelists here. Tonight, as Jake said, this is our third in a series of My Wellness Journey Begins With Me. And tonight's focus, as you can maybe tell by the panelists here that you can see, is specifically about and for queer identified men of color. And so with that, before we sort of get started, we were kind of kikiing a little bit before the call started, and I want to sort of allow that energy to continue. So if we are feeling like this is going to be more of a kiki, I'm all for that. If we need to get serious, we're going to be able to do that too. If we're going to need to take this spiritual, if we're going to share some things about ourselves and be very vulnerable, this is definitely an open and vulnerable space for that. Wherever this conversation leads us, I want us to all be able to go there together in the time that we're sharing together. And I sort of like to do that by just kind of level setting. We're all coming into this with different stresses. It's the end of the day. It's towards the end of the week. So if everyone watching, the panelists, everyone, will just take a big breath out first, blow it all out. And then a big breath in through your nose. Hold it for just a second. And then blow that out. So we're level set here, we're all together. And I want us to know that we're together and we are safe as we go through this conversation the rest of the evening, wherever that energy and wherever the spirit sort of takes us with that. And with that, I have the absolute distinct pleasure of introducing the fine gentlemen who are all around me here. And listen, you know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and the idea of mental health can kind of be somewhat vague or like a buzzword, right? Meanwhile, many individuals might feel that something is off mentally or emotionally, but not exactly know how to reach out or where to start, particularly for queer men of color. So with this panel, what we're trying to do is bring you our voices and our experiences to help all of us sort of better understand what the journey can look like. And as LGBTQ plus people, particularly people of color, we are aware of the disproportionate ways that we are impacted by world events like COVID-19, based not only on our sexual orientation, but those intersecting identities like race, age, gender identity, ability, immigration status, HIV status. And all of our panelists have a personal and or professional sort of exposure to these issues. And we are really excited to have everyone here today, and they're going to have an opportunity to share that. So this is how this is going to go. I'm going to introduce everyone here. I'm going to read some bios because y'all are going to be impressed. You'll be like, wait a minute, I didn't know everything's. And we'll work through those scripted questions throughout the evening, but we're also kind of, like I said, go where we feel moved. So if the panelists feel like asking questions of each other, that's great. Towards the end of the panel, we are going to get to your questions. So those of you who are watching right now, so be sure to put those in the chat. Jake is watching those questions right now. We're definitely going to leave some time and some breath and some space to tackle some of those questions at the end. And they can be fun and lighthearted. They can be a little bit deep. And the panelists, please share whatever. As you can see, Wilson Cruz there, who plays Dr. Hugh Culber on Star Trek Discovery, was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, baby, before relocating with his family to California. Wilson is a television series, My So-Called Life, and as Angel in the long-running Broadway production of Rent. Wilson is an executive producer for Visible, out on television, Apple TV's Plus 5-part docuseries about the history of LGBTQ representation on television. Wilson, welcome. You're very welcome. Hugh Wen. Hugh is a licensed clinical social worker and co-founder of Be It Rainbow of Orange County, which works to promote visibility, positive visibility, of the LGBTQ community to eliminate fear and to inspire compassion and affirmation. Welcome, Hugh. Dr. Vikas Jayadeva is a third-year family medicine resident working right now at Kaiser Permanente Los Angeles Medical Center. He is a graduate of the University of Michigan Medical School. His clinical and research interests include mental health and LGBTQ plus care. Vikas, hello, welcome. Darrell Stevens, up there, I'm mad with the perfect background and the perfect lighting, is an actor with TV credits that include, of course, Noah's Ark, 20s, Boy Culture, the series, and films like From Zero to I Love You, Beyond the Lights, and Pee-wee's Big Holiday. He's also the author of 2 books. His novel Shortcomings was on Lulu.com's bestseller list for LGBTQ fiction, and his motivational memoir, Required Reading, How to Get Your Life for Good, was reviewed as eloquent, insightful, and ruthlessly honest. Darrell, welcome.
Thank you, hi.
Scott Turner Scofield Openly trans since 2000, Scott has used his lived experience in intersectional analysis as a non-binary trans person who grew up part of an interracial family in the South, just absorb all of that for a second, to change the non-discrimination policies of several major universities, coach conservative CEOs at Fortune 500 companies to trans sensitivity in the workplace, and teach youth tools for the self-esteem that living an authentic LGBTQ+ life requires. As a professional storyteller, Scott was the first openly trans actor in daytime television with a recurring role on CBS's The Bold and the Beautiful. His one-man show special, Becoming a Man in 127 Easy Steps, premiered. It's great, isn't it? It premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival in 2020. And most recently, he has worked as trans experience consultant for HBO's Euphoria. Scott, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. And then I'm going to introduce Robert Mellon, who is not on right now. You don't see him, but he's a part of APAIT, and he's on the advisory board with us, and he's going to join a little bit later on. Robert has over 10 years of nonprofit organization experience serving various communities within Los Angeles County. He is currently serving as advisory board chair, I should know this, for APAIT, and is a quality systems and compliance manager for Johnson & Johnson Consumer Inc., where he leads the Neutrogena Open and Out Employee Resource Group. So Robert, I know you're hiding in there. We'll see you later on. So with the bios, we're just gonna start, and I'm gonna start this question for Wilson, Darrell, and Scott in particular. And Wilson, I'm probably gonna pick on you. And this is an opportunity to start, right? Congratulations. And again,
I want to preface all of this, whatever I'm saying today, by saying that I'm not quite sure if I should be in the audience of this panel or speaking. So, so I'm just going to be upfront and authentic, and that's what I'm going to start from that place. Go on. I did not mean to interrupt you.
Well, I think you bring up a perfect point. Listen, I'll relieve some pressure from all of us. We have, and I'm going to put the pressure on Vikas and Hugh, because we have two mental health practitioners with us. So when those questions come up, when those things come up about what should I do, how do I handle this, whatever, that's not on us. What we want to know is your experience. And right now, Wilson, your experience is, I don't know how to feel about being on this panel, and that is okay.
Well, I definitely don't want anyone to think that I am a mental health professional. I am someone who, is actively conscious of my mental health and trying to make good decisions in this time. I will be transparent by saying that I have had better days. I've had terrible days. But I've had some really good days too. And I have to take those, with the bad. Yesterday, for instance, was not a good day. If I'm going to be really honest. I tend to spiral a bit, and I don't catch myself in time, because I will literally take a thread and unspool that thread for hours at a time, which will lead me to a very dark place that doesn't actually exist. And I have to remind myself of that. And sometimes I don't catch myself in time. The only thing that's real, and I did a whole show about this. I said it every night, 8 shows a week. I would say there is no day but today. There is only this moment. And every time I think about that, every time I get lost in a thread and get myself worked up about something that hasn't happened, I remind myself that the only thing that's real is this. Now, the issue is that when I say that to myself, what's real in that moment is that I'm upset. So yeah, I'm gonna lay it all out right now. So I'm the guy that people call, right? Like in my family, for a lot of my friends, I'm happy and proud to be a shoulder for them. And I value that the fact that they come to me. I just also know that being who I am, I'm a bit of an empath. I carry a lot of that with me afterwards. And especially with my family, right? So if someone in my family is struggling, they're coming to me and, you know, I talk them off the ledge. Sometimes I will get off of the FaceTime and be, you know, distraught. Yeah. So I'm on the ledge and they're inside having a drink.
Right, because you took that all on, and I think you bring up a really interesting point that there are, and I think this speaks so specifically to lots of us. I mean, I'm just going to start. I'm just going to
go
there.
in.
We all have our own individual traumas, and you know, everyone talks all about traumas and whatever, but as queer, trans, gay, men of color, however you identify, whatever that intersectionality is, we have always been sort of an other. And I think in learning how to navigate in this world, we all have this thing that we develop that is this like insane empathy towards others, because other people are struggling and going something, and automatically we're like, yep, I can relate to that.
Yeah,
because
we really can.
Because we really can. And then because we're fighters and we push through, we also then end up being really good solution people. So then we give someone an itch up and they're like, take this, try this. And then it works. And then all of a sudden, that's why you've become the role you play in your family, Wilson. And I think you bring up such an amazing point that then who's taking care of us? Like, we just absorb it all and then we don't know what to do with it then, especially in quarantine.
Yeah. I will say this, if there has been a silver lining, because I always like to find one, it is that because we're all experiencing a universally common trauma together, that I feel like I have more permission to break down if I have to. I'm okay. It's okay if I do. Because it is okay. It should always be okay, right? But right now, because I think so many people are feeling that, there's less shame in it.
That is a very...
so that's my silver lining.
I think it is a silver lining. And Hugh, I'm going to kind of come to you with this one, just kind of piggyback off on that thought, and maybe Vikas as well, if you have experienced this in your practices in particular. Are you seeing this? Are you seeing that? Because I like the thought of the silver lining of COVID, right? Like, the silver lining of this allowing people to sort of open up in different ways? And are you seeing people who would not normally have addressed mental health or mental wellness, are you seeing them in your practice, Hugh, be more open because we all have this shared trauma?
So kind of before I start, I don't know about Dr. Vikas, but I'm like kind of starstruck right now with all of the
Definitely.
I know, right?
Okay, let's do away with that.
So just want to put that on the table.
I'm just another crazy person today.
And Darrell's just like glowing right now, and I don't know.
Always.
But I
have yet to see a pore on her in 20 years. But anyway, go ahead.
Dr. Hugh, you were saying?
I don't know if I'm seeing that trend yet, right, James? In terms of people are more willing to seek mental health services, right? I think for a lot of people in our community, especially the queer community right now, it's more they're having to attend to the basic needs, right? The housing, the financial need, food on their table, and I don't yet see, and in terms of my practice, but also working with other agencies, we're actually not seeing in mental health services, right, or crisis services. We're actually seeing a decline, right? And one of the theory is that people are really struggling with the economic hardships, the housing hardships, right? It doesn't mean that they're not experiencing the mental health, emotional symptoms. It's just not a priority for a lot of folks yet, right?
Well, I was just saying, I wasn't saying that people were seeking help out more. I'm just saying people are allowing themselves to have their feelings more in this moment. But anyway.
Yeah, no, I would say that's true, Wilson, that people are probably allowing, there's a common denominator in all of our experiences right now, which is some of the emotional symptoms or experiences that we're all going through, right? So yeah, Dr. Vickers, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Well, I was actually going to throw a question back to Hugh, and that was that I find that a big barrier for a lot of people is like actually getting in to see providers. Like I know my own provider doesn't see patients, and I feel like it's difficult for me to engage with like a therapist via Zoom phone calls. And I was just wondering if you feel like the fact that, you know, providers are like doing more telemedicine or trying to integrate more video calls in, do you feel like that's been a barrier to some of your patients?
I don't know, 'cause I haven't experienced that for my patients, right? I don't have a full caseload either, so it's a part-time kind of work for me. I haven't seen that. I know that a lot of the folks who I think that the fact that telemedicine is more available now and more people are doing it, the access to mental health services, or I think it's more readily available than before. I haven't seen sort of that as a barrier for my practice. I do telephonic, and so I prefer not to, but that's the best options right now. And I have such a small practice that I'm not even utilizing kind of the telehealth component and doing it over the phone. So yeah.
I think there's a really interesting point though that you're sort of working towards a little bit, Hugh, in that there are, you know, sometimes we feel like, let me make it personal because I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think I've often always thought of like mental health and mental wellness as like the middle-aged white lady who's like, kids are a little bit grown and she's doing yoga, and then she's like, okay, now I need to take care of myself and I have time for this, right? The kids are out the house. I've got, you know, like maybe my honey's at work or whatever. Like that's my image even now as someone who is such like a mental health advocate, that I feel like, okay, that's what wellness means. And I don't attach the word wellness to being queer, to being brown, to be all of those intersectionalities. And I sort of—
You connected to privilege?
That part. But we're all disprivileged to some degree because of this disease right now. And I guess I kind of wonder, like Darrell and or Scott, I'm going to pick on you guys for a second, but I feel like our mental health and our mental wellness journeys sometimes develop more from the ashes and less from the privilege. And I guess I feel like a lot of people are kind of there right now, whether we have a certain privilege or not. We all have this shared experience, and how COVID can sort of be like a launching point for your own mental wellness journey, even though it might seem kind of backwards to do that.
Yeah. I would say, Scott, unless Scott, you want to jump in. Yeah, I would say that what this time has really sort of provided for me is an opportunity to really take inventory of all the privilege that I do have, because I am not one of the folks who are having to line up in a food bank, you know, for a food bank, or figure out what I'm going to do about my housing. I very fortunately have those things sort of situated right now, and it's just, you know, by chance that happens to be the case. And so what I feel like I'm able to do in this time is focus on what I can do as an artist, as a human being, to provide a space in the future for what the people who are really suffering right now. What can I do to hopefully make the world better, right? Like, artists are creators, and hopefully we can do things. You know, what we're all experiencing right now is Netflix and Hulu and HBO, and we're all sort of watching TV at home. And at some point, new programming is going to go away. We will have watched everything because everything would have, everything in the can will have been put on TV. So, I feel like one of the silver linings of COVID right now as a creator is to be putting forth work and trying to create things that people in the future, after all this is over, can enjoy and remember that, we still have to be taking care of queer kids, and we still have to be taking care of our queer elders, and we still have to be taking care of the people of color and the homeless folks who are not experiencing this in the same way that we are safely at home. There are a lot of us who don't have the luxury to even consider mental health right now. They're struggling. So
some of them aren't safe at home.
Some of them are not even safe at home. So I feel like what this time has been for me is really an opportunity to just kind of sit back and take inventory of all the blessings that I've had, and hopefully, use this what feels like free time, sort of, to be productive and thoughtful. And I see Wilson, not to put Wilson on the spot again, but doing things where he's reaching out to communities. My friend Alec Mapa is also doing little live shows on Instagram where he's helping to feed nurses in New York. And everyone who has a platform right now has sort of an opportunity to do something for someone else. And I feel like this panel is a little bit of that, right? We're trying to do something to help when we can. So I think that the beautiful thing about this, the silver lining for me, is just this quiet time is an opportunity to really be thoughtful and proactive and imaginative, and figure out ways that we can be of service, in the world.
Scott, I don't know if there's I like the silver linings theme that Wilson set up for us. Thank you, Wilson, that we're just gonna keep carrying this through with that. If there's what silver linings are you finding in terms of mental health, mental wellness, for you and the community as a whole, in COVID? How is this sort of working for you with that?
Well, first, the reason why I was so excited to be on this panel is just that this panel exists, that we're talking about this. And when I was, promoting on social media, the thought that men, cis men get taught this and trans men like myself learn it, right? That you're not allowed to have emotion, and really the consequences that you will suffer if you do have emotions are really rooted in homophobia, right? Right? Because you can't be an emotional man, because if you're an emotional man, then you're gay, and here you go, right? It's right there, right?
Well, and if we're really going to get down to it, it's really all misogyny, right? Because it's the
femininity. Yep.
Yes.
Right. And
I'm sorry, I keep interrupting.
It's a participatory conversation. So those things are really all linked together. And so I love this conversation. Just the fact that we're having it and it's now going to exist and we're going to be able to promote it and people can talk about it, right? So there is that thoughtfulness. People are really saying okay, how can we continue to contribute to our communities? That APAIT is thinking that way and created this, right? That this is what we're doing. And so what I really hope is that out of thoughtfulness and conversations where we're trying to take care of each other, that we will find a way that maybe we can do away with or start to really chip away with at the misogyny, the homophobia that is blocking all men from being able to feel who they are and have their feelings and get support, the support that every human needs, right?
Mm. There's so much to that. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed because you took me there a little bit, and about, in particular, I'm sort of matching, Scott, what you were saying, and Darrell with what you were saying about having, a lot of us have time, because sort of regardless of our circumstances, we have time to be thoughtful and to really think through these things, and that can be really scary. To sit with your own thoughts and emotions. Whatever your sort of intersectional identity is, to sit with that when you're sort of forced to, when you run out of watching things on Netflix and Hulu and whatever, when you're forced to sit with that, or on CBS On Demand, Star Trek Discovery, there's your little plug, Wilson, you're welcome. With that is very, very scary. And I kind of want to go back to you guys, Scott, Wilson, and Darrell in particular. People are thinking and they may get to a place where they're like, it's time for me to start my mental health, my mental wellness journey. I'm ready to start. I've had time to think. I'm ready to get rid of that misogyny, that homophobia, the transphobia, the queerphobia, whatever. I'm ready to start. How do I do it? And I think it would be really valuable for the people watching to sort of know, each of you individually, like, how did your mental health, mental wellness journey start? Darrell, I'm gonna pick on you first.
Okay, great. So a few years ago, I was in a sort of a dark place. Wasn't working enough, just wasn't feeling like I was being, like I was nurturing my relationships enough. I wasn't feeling like the world was seeing me the way I thought that I was supposed to be seen. And a friend of mine, Jeffrey Bornman, who is a physical trainer and a life coach, sort of sat me down and got me into meditation. And for me, what that process entailed was really sitting quietly and visualizing what I was supposed to, who I was supposed to be, who I wanted to be. Taking away all the fear and the sort of self-doubt that, accumulates while you're working in Hollywood. It just sort of cakes on your body and you're just having to sort of chip it off and really just sort of see myself as a productive member of society who was offering something to the world around me, and not necessarily an actor who needs a spotlight. Like, what am I doing? How am I being a responsible human being? I really sort of changed I worked at changing my perspective from being about why me, why am I not getting what I think I'm supposed to have, to what can I be doing with what I do have to improve the world around me. And so a lot of that had to do with meditation. A lot of that had to do with, and also sort of shifting my behavior in my relationships and my friendships. There's a trope, I guess, or I guess even a habit that gay men in particular, pick up on being sort of snarky and bitchy when they're in a dark place. We go to our unhappiness can sometimes be reflected as bitchiness, right? And we get comfortable being unkind to people. And I felt myself. I had one of my best friends sat me down and said, "You are hurting my feelings." And I got defensive, and I had to sort of like fight him on it in the moment. And I went home, and 3 days later I called him and I said, "I heard what you said, and I'm going to work on that." And our relationship is so much better now. It's a completely different relationship because I am not looking for ways to hurt him. I'm looking for ways to help him. And it's not just about me being, it's not about being better or having even the right to help. In my relationship, I'm thinking, what can I bring to you that's better? How can we make this exchange something more positive? Everything for me is now like, build positive things. Don't worry about the negative things that you feel like were weighing you down. What can you be doing consciously to improve your life and the life of the people around you and the world? Like, if we think about, what COVID's going to leave behind, like, so many of us have lost people already, right? And if you think of our lives now with social media as being sort of this capsule of what we brought into the universe, what we offered the world, what we said, what we did, what we looked like when we said it. What's the legacy that you want to be leaving behind? And how can we be more deliberate about improving the world? If your focus is on improving the world, even if it's just in, your 4 best friends. If I can be kinder to my 4 best friends, that's improving the world, because they're taking that kindness and it's extending it outward, right? So I just feel like mental wellness for me has really been about changing the way I think about myself and my own power in the world and the universe to be a force of good. Wow. And focusing on that and being very focused. And when I do sit down and meditate, it's about that. What can I do for good?
Mm-hmm. And that good not being internally focused, right? You talk about
that's crucial. That's crucial,
isn't it?
Because actors, and I'm not going to speak for Wilson, we have a tendency to focus on ourselves because we're sort of forced to. How do we look? How does our voice sound? What does our body look like right now? What are we presenting when we walk into a room for an audition? All these things about what do we look like and what am I worth become sort of exacerbated, I think, for gay men also, but also for gay male actors who are also dealing with this sort of forced focus on the external. It gets very easy to get locked into that sort of cycle of I'm only seeing myself and what is it doing for me and how am I seeing myself and how are they seeing me? And what,
Well, it's funny that you bring that up, because that is literally the issue that sent me to seek out mental health. Because imagine all of that at 19 and experiencing it in front of
the entire world,
millions of people, right? In a moment in my life where I was supposed to be, figuring out who I was being defined by everything that happened to me, that I was experiencing. And so my mental health journey was about allowing myself the same grace that I allow other people, because I expected so much more of myself because of what I thought other people were going to think, right? So it's a form of arrogance, really, of perfectionism. And I'll never forget, I'll share this. I will never forget my therapist saying to me,
and then he forgot it.
No, I just got to remember it in the context. No, so I told her about this mistake that I made. And she says, well, what would you say to your friend if that happened to them? And I said, well, I would tell them that they made a mistake and that that it'll be fine and that I forgive them. And she said, well, why can't you say that to yourself? Aren't you allowed to make mistakes? Or are you the only human in the world who's never made one?
Okay. hidden very close there, Wilson.
And so I remember at that moment, I said, we'll see each other next week.
Right. Well, I think that there's, we feel this sense of, I have to be, and again, I'm not going to speak for everybody because everyone's individual experiences are individual, but this sense of like, okay, I'm queer and I'm brown, and for me, I'm fat. So I have to be funnier than everybody else. I have to be a better basketball player than everybody else. I have to be better at school than everybody else. Like that was my coping mechanism, was just like, I'm gonna outdo you. I'm out hustle you. I'm outwork you. And no, you better damn well believe I'm not going to make a mistake. And then that, because I'm a human being and I make mistakes, soul crushing, right? When you make those mistakes and you spiral. And so I think that there's,
and also you can add to that also, when we're just men of color in general, sometimes, for many of us, we're the only men of color for me, most of the time, I'm the only man of color at work who's gay or man of color, right? So I already feel like I can't make a mistake, right? I have to
take, right.
Not to mention, Wilson was the first out gay person on television. Like Wilson has this added layer of responsibility to the community, right? To the culture. So there's a lot of pressure that you have to deal with, and there's not always a guidebook in terms of how to process all of that.
So I didn't really allow. Yeah. I wouldn't allow myself to make a mistake.
Yeah, and on a lesser degree, every queer man of color is probably doing that to some extent, right? Feeling like I'm the first one in the family.
The reason why I bring it up is because I think there are people right now out there who are like, oh, I'm not using this time to change the world or write my magnus opus, and are beating themselves up because they had too many cupcakes or something. You know what I mean? That in this moment, right, you know, we have to do what we can to soothe ourselves. And, you know, everything in moderation. And we're not going to make every right choice every single time. And guess what? Nobody's ever gone through this before.
Right.
Do you think part of it? Do you
there's
think
no
part of it
way
is
to do
that?
it.
Do you think part of it is that like a lot of our our identity is that we seek external validation, and that we don't seem to get that same external validation in this environment? And I think in that way, social media can sometimes be toxic because you're seeing what other people are doing, and at the same time, it's like, why am I not baking bread, or why am I not going for like a marathon run or something crazy like that?
Well, I read this article, and I wish I could remember the author. This is like the pain of reading online all the time, right? But there's this wonderful connection made, you know, as I look into and continue to study white privilege, right? How perfectionism and white supremacy are connected, right? And then you like extrapolate that to everything that we're talking about here. It means that, you know, if you put, for instance, just, you know, gender oppression, right? And my sort of, you know, my perfectionism around my gender, right? That's actually my response to oppression. So I'm constantly like battling oppression as I'm trying to be and trying to get that external, you know, validation. So the external validation is rooted in oppression, right?
I mean,
if you apply that to gay men and just sort of the ways that we many of us present ourselves on social media, how many of us have sort of err on the side of perfect bodies and perfect, you know, perfect bodied friends, and there's this whole fascination.
Talk about the perfect body to a trans person, right?
Yeah, how perfect our bodies have to be at all times. That's rooted in somebody at some point saying, you all are sick, your bodies don't work right. And now we're still locked into that thinking, right?
Well,
yeah, so whatever our quest is for
guilty.
Well, now I want to just, Scott, you brought up all these issues, by the way, and I want to sort of take some responsibility that initially this panel was put together as a queer men of color panel. And Scott, you so graciously made that intersection of understanding white privilege, and you as a white identified person, I'm stating because of that. So thank you for understanding that I think the entire conversation goes together, right? Talking about being a queer person of color and understanding white privilege and having conversations with individuals who are Caucasian and white is very important. So I sort of leaned a little bit on this being a panel of queer men of color, but I think you in particular have done some incredible writing and work about people having that issue with their bodies. And if you have an opportunity really to just sort of share, like, even and you know, COVID is always a layer, right? COVID is just the thing that seasons everything we're going through right now. But that experience of that, you know, Darrell brought up about like having to have this perfect body and not having a good relationship with your body. And it is a completely different experience for trans individuals who may then also be experiencing homelessness right now and COVID and all those other things.
Whew.
Where do you even start?
Right.
Right.
You go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, whatever any of us is experiencing, and they're all different, right? Like me experiencing perfectionism and understanding that as part of like white supremacy is completely different from a man of color experiencing that, right? Like they're you know, we're coming at different things, even though the oppression comes from the same source. Right. We experience it in different ways. And so, but I do think that there's room to say, I want to be careful as I say this, but that, whatever we might be experiencing when we are feeling ourselves in contrast to some oppressor, right? Whether it's whiteness, whether it's class, ability, cis-centered, cis sexism, heterosexism, any of those things, right? That it's this what we're doing is engaging in it's traumatizing us, and as we're trying to be like good in the face of that, we're actually behaving in trauma, right? So we're being traumatized as we're trying to like be the best we can be, which is really odd. And yeah, I think as somebody with a trans experience, I have really I've spent a lot of time sorting that out. And that's where my connection to this wellness conversation comes in. One of the things you said earlier was, about and I agree, this is whenever I talk to people about self-care, I'm coming at it from a place of how do you survive? I'm someone who has multiple suicide attempts, right? Like from an early age, right? And this comes from the invisibility of being trans, of growing up in a world before 2015, right? Before the transgender tipping point, before there was any representation, before there was any language, right? And yes, I have this kind of kumbaya interracial experience, but it was with a deeply conservatively Christian family in the South. So being queer and trans was there was like a layer of denial and invisibility that was self-destroying. So I come at self-care from this pole of self-destroying, right? And so basically I'm saying, instead of like, how do you do self-care? I mean, like, how do you not destroy yourself in this world that wants to destroy you? And to me, it was, you do whatever you can. I started going to therapy at 16. I have had, I kind of joke, to offplay the seriousness of it, that I've done like every kind of therapy I could get into, you know what I mean? That I could afford, that I could possibly get, I've tried medications. I'm in yoga and meditation now. I've been inpatient. I've done I've done all of the things. And what was super interesting is when I was an inpatient, everybody there was either a person of color, or if they were white, they were poor. Right. So it's not the like most serious interventions for wellness are not for like rich white ladies. You know what I mean? So I am a big proponent of whatever you do that gets you through the day. Kate Bornstein has a wonderful book called Hello, Cruel World, 101 Alternatives to Suicide for Youth, Queers, and Other Freaks or something. Great title.
Such a good tip.
Right. And it's literally like a book that you can pick up, and one of the steps is moisturize. Right? And it's true, like that can feel really good. And whatever you're killing yourself, because how are we going to have a revolution if you're not in it?
Touch this skin, touch all of it.
I was gonna say that, but Scott, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I'm really impressed. I'm not familiar with you, and I'm so impressed. I'm gonna go like look you up and figure out all the ways I can follow you.
And be ready to be amazed, by the way. I reached out to Scott a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, oh my God, I'm totally so excited that you're coming on the panel. I'm
so impressed.
And I was like, me too. You.
I was like, oh my God, this is great. Hugh and Vikas, I think, Scott, you bring up something that's so interesting, that I think that there is a conversation about this, understanding this wellness and this privilege, right? That I have this image of the white lady doing yoga in Pasadena. And Vikas and Hugh, what you are experiencing in your practice, and what Scott's talking about sometimes the wellness journey is the wellness to getting to the end of the day. And so for individuals who are watching right now and sort of getting whatever they're getting out of this conversation, what are some things that you just, and these don't have to be like life-changing, whatever, but just for those individuals who are on whatever level they are, just doing what they need to do to get through the day, what are some of those things that people can hear right now that will help them sort of get through the day?
That's a really great question. And I think it depends sort of on what their barriers sort of are in terms of like what those issues are in terms of getting through the day. I think Sean Archer, there's this researcher at Harvard that studies happiness and resilience. And I think one of the biggest things that we can do on a daily basis is I think Wilson touched a little bit on this, but it's, you know, gratitude journaling and like thinking through and changing our mindsets and like looking around and being grateful for the things that we do have, and not sort of staying in this whole deficit mentality of all the things that you're missing out on or the things that you don't have in this moment, but focusing really on the things that you do have, whether that's an apartment, a home, that, whether that has access to like the outdoors or being able to go for a walk. So I think gratitude, I think journaling is a huge part of it. And I think it's, you know, also just doing the best that you can and not really comparing yourself to other people, and just seeing, you know, finding those things that bring you wellness on a day-to-day, whether that's exercise or meditation. For me, it's meditating, and whether that's carving out that space in my day for 10 minutes to just like still my mind and just sort of realize that things are going to be okay, and that I just need to, you know, recenter. And so for me, those are the big things. Those are the things I usually tell my patients to do.
Have you found that creating some kind of structure for your day can be helpful? Because I have found that if, you know, even if I just create, which I have, I've just created a structure for my day, even if I'm just going to improvise on it, just as like a, you know, a skeleton draft of the day. And because, you know, things come in that will change it, I'll have to do something else or whatever. But, you know, I like getting up knowing I'm going to make the coffee and then go read the paper on the balcony and then probably get a workout.
100%. I totally agree. I actually make a to-do list like every day, and I will put things on there like make coffee or like little things that it's like, so it's almost like a victory when you cross up those things that you were going to do anyways, right? So it's like, yes, I did it. So it's like, yes, I feel like I've accomplished something. And it's like, oh, it's stuff that you probably normally did pre-COVID times, right? So, you know, it's just validating yourself for getting up and making your bed. Like, that's a victory in these times.
I mean, you know, you know, outside of the fact that I can't really leave the house, I went through, you know, many, many months at a time, year to year, where I was unemployed. So I learned how to, you know, create a day, but it usually called for leaving the house. So I think that, you know, even then I'd learned to create a structure, and it helps in this scenario.
So I would add, you know, for me, making a list of to-dos, it's actually anxiety provoking. So for some folks that doesn't
not work for you.
Right? But I know that having, especially during time where we're at right now, where we're isolated, you know, and it's easy not to have a structure. It's really important to have a structure or routine, right? That is, you know, if you wake up before COVID, if you wake up at 9 or 8, wake up at 8, right? Go to sleep at the same time. Routine and that structure. Yeah, for some folks, having lists doesn't really work. And so it's important to find things that work for you, right? What I would add to sort of the earlier question, James, is, you know, something that doesn't, you know, regardless whether you're poor, you know, black, white, yellow, whatever, that we all have is our breath, right? And our breath is free. You know, there's no fees on that, right? And so how can we use our breath as an anchor to kind of bring us back and center us, right? And so the practice of mindfulness and being in the present moment, I think has really shown not just the changes in the brain, right? And the structure of the brain, but also have really helped, and how that has really helped people in terms of decreasing anxiety, depression, right? And fear, feeling trauma and whatnot as well. And so, you know, mindfulness is a practice that I really introduce my clients to in therapy, and it's free. Your breath is free. In any moment, you have it as an anchor. So,
could I offer a breath practice that I learned that's really helpful to me? That'd be okay? Okay, well, I'll do it together. I'll teach it to you. Okay. So my teacher calls it the infinity breath. Okay. And it comes with a practice where you put your hands together like this. And this comes with the intention of, it's like putting like a ball, right? With giving yourself space. right? So it's kind of telling your body, like, I'm intending to give myself space, okay? And you can hold that wherever is comfortable for you. And the way that the breath is you're going to go in through the nose, hold at the top, out through the mouth, like you're blowing a candle, back in, like in a sucking motion, like, and then out through the nose, right? So I'm going to go in, out, back in, and then out. Do it one more time.
I like that.
Good, right? And you can pause at the end points of each breath. You can do it for longer intervals, like out for 4, in for 4, or longer as you wish.
I really like that. I also like this visual.
Mm-hmm. And I heard that there's something about it's making neural connections in your brain, your fingertips touching too.
I totally believe that. Anyway, thank you for that.
Yeah,
Wow.
no, I completely agree. The breath, my teacher says if you can change your breath, you can change your mind.
Yeah.
Hugh, just with respect to mindfulness, can you be a little more specific with us and our audience about how breath is connected to mindfulness? I just want to just sort of in layman's terms break that down.
I think in terms of my understanding and my practice with Zen Buddhism, it's really about the breath being an anchor, right? A reminder and of you being in the present moment helps remind you of being in the present moment. I think a lot of times we're breathing, but we're breathing from the lungs and from the diaphragms, right? So our breath is actually very short. But the true breathing really comes from the diaphragms. And so I know for me, sometimes I breathe from the lungs, and so it's very short, right? And especially when I'm anxious or I'm stressed out, I kind of breathe, like right now I'm breathing from the lungs. It really helps me to place my hands, both of my hands, on my belly, to make sure that I'm actually breathing from the belly, from the depth of my belly, right, the diaphragm. So, and really the breath is just kind of when your mind is going all over the place, right, and going back to the breath kind of helps you kind of bring back into the center. And yeah, so really mindfulness is bringing awareness to the present moment. That's it.
I had an anxiety attack 3 weeks ago, and I literally breathed myself out of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which is really
it was really late at night. It woke me up, and what was I gonna do? There's nowhere to go. There's nobody. Who am I calling at 2 o'clock in the morning? So I literally just kind of, did exactly what you were talking about, which was bringing my attention to my breath.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when we think about mindfulness or meditation,
Sorry,
there's somehow like a Western, it's meditation and mindfulness has been Westernized to the point where, there's a belief that when you're meditating, you have to clear your mind, but that's actually not possible, right?
right.
It's not possible to clear your mind. It's actually probably not good to clear your mind, completely, right? And so it's really
Donald
about,
Trump seems to do it, and he's fine.
You know
Sorry.
what? We got
what did you say, Donald Trump? You say Donald Trump?
Minutes through this conversation without talking about Donald Trump.
Oh. Well, his mind is full of shit. That's what it is.
Speak
we'll
on it. But
well, if that is your physician's,
That is a medical opinion.
what is the word?
Right, exactly. But it has to be true. It has to be true. You know what, Hugh? You've relieved something for me that hopefully others can relate to. I'm 40. I'm fixing to be 42 years old, and I've been trying to meditate and be mindful and whatever for years, and I can't ever completely clear my mind. And so I feel like a meditation failure all the time.
Aw.
I will do yoga for 2 hours, which I've learned is my meditation. And I get the closest to my mind being clear, if you will. But I just thank you for sort of taking that away from me, that like, I shouldn't even try to have a clear mind to meditate.
Girl, the first time I tried to meditate and I was trying to clear my mind, I passed out. I literally passed out. Like, I was sitting, meditating, trying to clear my mind, empty my mind, and my face like went on the floor, like smacked on the floor.
Because it's not good.
Because I was trying to concentrate too much and was holding my breath rather than being kind with whatever thoughts or emotions that were coming to me, right? So I get you.
I love that breath exercise. I'm going to do it.
I do too. And I love this. You said kind, and I sort of want to ask everyone here, and Hugh and Vikas, whether that's a medical or mental health position that you have or just your own personal one. But I think it's really important for folks to learn how to be kind to themselves, particularly right now. Wilson, you kind of hinted at this earlier, but I would just kind of like to go around and know, like, what are you doing now in the time of quarantina, Miss Pandemia, who is ruling our lives? How are you being kind, learning to be kind to yourself? Like, what is that like nugget that you're like, this is the thing that I'm doing to be kind to myself right now, even though quarantine has messed with my life?
Well, I'll start by saying I am mindful of how I'm speaking to myself. And that's a lot of it for me, really, because it's a good exercise for me. If I have a thought and I'll go, is that how you would treat your friends? So that's helpful. And creating a physical practice. I need to be physical. I need it for the endorphins. I need it it's part of my job. So if I can't do that, if I don't do that for myself, then I start to feel like, I'm failing. So, don't want that. So I do something. I'll go on a bike ride. I'll take a yoga class. I'll lift some weights here or something. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. On a daily basis.
Yeah. Scott?
Sometimes all of them.
I actually had a panic attack a week ago also. And
those are fun.
Well, it was wild because I've had panic attacks plenty of times. Like, I've had plenty of panic attacks. But this was purely physical. And I thought I was having a heart attack.
Yeah.
Right? It was wild. And because, like, if I had known it, if I know what it feels like. If I had known that it was happening in my mind, I might have been able to breathe my way through it or do something. But I was like, gosh, I have chest pain. My left arm hurt. I mean, it was everything. Called the nice people at Kaiser. They were like, please come in right now. And I was like, okay, which is scary because I'm not earning money right now. And also just going to a hospital while there's a plague, you know what I mean? Like, is terrifying, right? Yeah. But I went in, they were great. There was like nobody there. So that was kind of amazing too. And they were like, you're just having a panic attack. And what happened to me in that realization was I realized all of the external stuff that I do all my work for, right? All of that validation has gone away, right? And there was just this huge layer of pressure that I was putting on myself to bake the bread and write the novel and do the thing and do this just as a way of holding on to that external validation. And it was a wonderful moment after that scary moment of just like letting that go, right? And I'm just saying, I'm alive. And like, that's enough right now. Like, that's a miracle right now. Right. And so just really like being kind to myself and recognizing like just the worth of my existence.
Work.
And that was a lifetime in coming. Right?
Worth of my existence. I hope people are writing this down.
I agree. I am. Because sometimes we don't, I mean, y'all in particular, I'm in the medical field. I'm a nurse. And so it's really interesting to hear you guys as entertainers and performers and artists who need to derive, struggle with having to derive your validation and your self-worth from external, but that it is something I feel like nursing and Vikas and Hugh, you guys can maybe back me up on this. The mental health and the medical and nursing professionals are maybe interesting. There's a parallel in that we are also about the other, like about the people we're taking care of. And sometimes there's some validation and there's some self-worth in that, in terms of like I'm finishing my dissertation, and it literally last draft goes in next Friday. And I've been working at the hospital a lot, but I was struggling with my own issues of being like, I'm not in New York on the front lines, intubating people, like doing these things because I'm super nurse practitioner. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. I need to leave my husband behind and my family and whatever, and I need to go into the trenches and do this. And if I'm not, I'm a bad nurse. And even that sort of sub-layer of like, you know, people are like, well, aren't you crazy busy right now? Isn't it insane in the ICU? And I'm like, well, the one day a week I work in the ICU, yeah. Otherwise, I'm writing this damn dissertation. And I mean, even, so it's just sort of interesting to hear that sort of regardless of what your experience is, there's this relationship with like your otherness and how you're sort of perceived by others, or we think we're perceived by others, that can really influence us. I don't know, Vikas, you have something?
For sure. I think a big thing is like reframing that, right? And reframing it in a positive way. So looking at the little things that you are doing on a day-to-day that is contributing. Like even writing that dissertation is putting positive energy. It's putting something very valuable into the world. And so I think that's also just ties back to your question about like what I'm doing. I think a lot of us, in order to get to, you know, in order to achieve success, we kind of have these like negative mentality, like that's reinforced, where it's like, I'm never good enough. I need to keep trying harder. I need to be better. And so I think this is one of those times where you kind of take a step back and just focus on the things that you are doing well, focus on the things that you are contributing to the world.
Yeah, so for me, in answering your question, James, I think in terms of self-care, I call it loving kindness for myself. So what are kind of those loving kindness activities that I can do for myself? And it doesn't have to be grand. It does not have to be big, right? It does not have to be long either if you don't have a lot of time, right? For me, what's key for me is bubble bath. So
Come on, bubble bath.
Just before COVID happened, I was like, why the hell do we have a bathtub, right? Because we never take a bath in one. I don't know how many people take baths anymore. They just go in, shower, and then, get out, right?
How gone take me away.
And so I've just discovered like bubble bath, and so that's what I've been doing. But the other thing in terms of self-care or loving kindness practices, it's really about bringing intentionality into what you're doing. Because there's a lot of things that we may be doing that is self-care. We go out, have, dinner when we can, we could, right? Dinner, or spend time with friends and families, etc. But there may have never been intentionality, that's something that fuels our soul, right? That's something that that we enjoy doing, right? And so bringing intentionality, and it may be just taking a moment to say, so I have to verbally say out loud, oh, I'm taking a bath for self-care. In order for that to be registering, because I'm such a doer. And so if I just do things without intention, then I'm just doing it. I'm just completing something. I'm completing a task, right? So yeah, bringing intentionality in terms of what you're doing, that is nurturing your body, nurturing your mind, and nurturing your soul, right? It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be long, right? It can be a minute, a breath, an in-breath and out-breath. That's also self-care, right? So yeah, so intentionality.
But it also works if it's big and long.
Oh.
I meant,
She meant the mental wellness.
Yes, the wellness.
Actually, and I have some, speaking of big and long, I have sex questions for Vikas and Hugh, maybe in a minute. I can tackle those too. But Darrell, I want to hear from you too, what just everyone has had a chance to share. What's your, and maybe it's a little self-care, if you know what I mean. I just want to know, like, what is your thing that you are doing to like be kind to yourself now during COVID?
I mean, it's such a good question, and I feel like I'm always being kind to myself now, because there's nothing else to, like, you know, I eat what I want to eat. If I want to smoke some weed, I'll be some weed. I haven't sipped from it, but I got this right here. Like, anything I want to do, I'm just doing.
Go ahead and sip. Go ahead and sip.
Who's gonna check me?
Oh God.
Who's gonna check me, boo? So basically, I'm in this space right now where I moved in with my partner in April, which was planned. And his family is here because they were living in China. They came here for Christmas, and they could not go back to China because some shit happened.
Right.
And,
In China.
Well, apparently, in China. And so I have 2 nephews and a niece living here. There's lots of space. There's like we're cramped in any way. But what I'm really enjoying right now is being around kids and being around just young people, 10, 7, and 5 years old.
Wow.
Sort of experiencing this with them in a way that's like, we will never have this time. This is my partner's niece and nephews who live in Agora Hills normally, but they've been in China for 1.5 years and for work, for work. And I feel like this is, you know, we spent time with them before they left, but they've been gone for 1.5 years, and now they're in the house with us, and we see them every day, and we, you know, they're out in the pool, and everyone is just having this. We have dinner every night. I'm gonna be missing it in 15 minutes. We have dinner every night together upstairs. Aww. And there's just something so amazing about spending time with family. I know that a lot of my friends, Wilson included, are alone right now, and just sort of dealing with this sort of being alone in a pandemic is a very different experience than what I'm experiencing right now. I've got tons of people, you know, I have enough space to have quiet time if I need it, but also if I want to go outside and take in some sun and splash in the pool with the kids, it's there. I'm just sort of like, I'm really appreciative. I'm just really sort of grateful. I'm constantly living in gratitude right now that I have this space and these people to be going through this with, and just, we'll never forget this time together, you know?
Right. Absolutely.
I mean, no.
Right. Well, you bring up such an interesting point about the different experiences, and I'm sure that people watching can relate. By the way, those of y'all watching, we have about 15 minutes left, and I promise I'm gonna get to some of your questions, okay? So if you have questions, put them in the Q&A, we'll get to them for everybody. I'm gonna leave probably about 10 minutes for that. So, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but how are individuals experiencing this in terms of being partnered and being with the family or being with someone and then being single?
Oh.
In the time of COVID, it feels like a very, very different experience. And there is certainly some mental health and some wellness attached to your relationship with your partner, or like being single. Wilson, it sounds like once you're done chewing, I'll stall for you, that you might have
You can let somebody else go first.
I'm with my partner, and we've been very lucky in that we're having a good experience of this together. Like, we have a good relationship. You know, I knew when this first started, I was thinking a lot about the DV, the domestic violence, that, you know, even people who wouldn't under normal circumstances be caught up in something like that, right? I knew that this was going to set off, and that worries me a lot, you know.
Yeah.
Then thinking, the next most immediate thought I had was, you know, when I saw that the schools were all closing, colleges were closing, and thinking about young people who I know personally who have to go home to really bad situations, you know. And so for me, part of being kind too is about checking in on people, you know, and we made this board of people that, you know, we got to just check off, make sure we call, you know what I mean? And just check in on people, because you don't know, because we're all so isolated, you know, we don't know what people are going through, what path they're going down in their head, and how just like a text, you know, can really, or a whole conversation can really be helpful to someone. Chase Strangio, who's an amazing trans lawyer, he's like at the Supreme Court, like no big deal. You know, he put out this thing on Twitter and said, if you're young and trans and you want to talk to somebody, I'm here for you. And it was awful because, you know, he then got blasted by the trolls calling him a pedophile and all those things. But you know, we don't realize our sphere of influence. And especially I think one of the silver linings we could use, you know, one of the things we could do to flip right now is, what if we could flip social media to be like how we take care of people instead of like how we tear people down?
Oh,
So just being reminded of your influence right now, even if you're alone. I mean, Wilson, let's talk about that. Even if you're alone, you have so much influence, right? And your ability to make people feel good, and you know, that's just there for you.
Well, I will say, you know, the smartest thing I've done this whole time is to go on to Instagram Live. And I started it honestly because I was lonely, right? So I was like looking for human connection. And what it turned into was an opportunity for me to go live with other people around the country, and check in on them and give them a space, a safe space to say, hey, you know what? I'm not doing great. And here's why. And, you know, sometimes it just helps to talk about it. And then, you know, bringing on people who are professional, who can come in and, you know, give good advice based on science. And, or, you know, or somebody who can make them laugh, make me laugh, or entertain me, or move me in some way. And, you know, for a half hour, 40 minutes, I'm a part of a community. And it does me as probably more good than anybody. You know, I feel connected to them. I feel connected to, you know, I need that. It's been 10 weeks since I've had a hug.
Well, or I know, and we're
So that answers.
that's very, very real. I think that
But
people, they're not my only friend who's living alone right now. And I feel like, you know, I went and visited a friend yesterday. There's actually the same friend who told me I was hurting his feelings, you know, 10 years ago. But I visited my friend. We sat in the middle of the street, and I sat in my car and he sat on his car, and with masks on. And we talked, and at the end of the conversation, it was a great conversation, but at the end of the conversation, we had this impulse to hug, because I could just see he needs a hug. But we can't do that. And that's such a...
It's painful.
It is. It is.
It's
I
painful.
I hugged a nurse at work the other day, and on that same impulse, we had kind of a really difficult situation going on and whatever. And we came out of the room and we did our whole thing. We took all the PPE off and we washed our hands and we were whatever. We were super great. And we just grabbed each other.
Yeah.
And then we were like, wait, like, did that just happen? You know, and
such a real impulse.
It was the craziest situation, because I was like, this is the first human being, other than like listening to people, you know, at work, like that sort of thing. This is the first human being that I have embraced besides my husband in 2.5 months. And that sort of, it's tremendous. And it kind of leads me to, you know,
I'm going to say that also answers your other question of how I'm dealing with being single, because I haven't been hugged in 10 weeks. So
and it's
that answers all your questions. I've been hugging myself.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
And listen, it's right.
Damn right there isn't.
Some people are getting a little tired of hugging themselves. And they are dialing up those apps and having folks over.
Oh yeah, no.
And I feel like we need to kind of talk about that a little bit, in that
I'm talking about it on the apps. How about that?
On the apps, but like, are there, instead of it this
So
being,
I'm saying I've been having these conversations on the app.
like telling people
who are like, yeah, you know, you should come over. And then of course I'm like, okay. And then I have to give them the dissertation on why they should not be telling people to come over.
Well, are there harm, and Hugh, you guys can help me out with this. Are there harm reduction strategies for this? Are we still in this world of like, no, that's it, you're not hooking up with anybody? Is it, what if there's that trusted person that you were having sex with before all of this, and you believe them that they've quarantined or isolated? Like, I feel like we're in a little bit of a gray zone with that. And I don't know, Vikas, I'm picking on you, but I don't know if you have some thoughts about this for those listening.
I mean, I think we're in like a tough period still, and there's just a lot about COVID that we don't really know about. So I think it is really hard to, like, I don't know if there's any like best practices that people can really integrate in terms of, I think, other than abstinence. But if some people feel that they need to do that, I think one way to sort of mitigate the risk is maybe if you have like a trusted, like if you're like a single partner, somebody that you trust, somebody that you're repeatedly hooking up with, maybe that would be like, that would probably mitigate the risk then, rather than having multiple random partners. I think that would be one strategy.
The New York City Public Health Department put out some best practices in terms of sex, including same-sex relationships. So you could look those up. They kind of list the risks, right?
I think their recommendation is to masturbate. So
well, yeah, but they do tell you, you know, what things are riskier than others.
Yeah.
Analingus, for example.
Right. So you can at least measure, you know.
Yeah, is riskier than
your level of comfort,
apparently, right?
Yes.
Because COVID apparently tracks through that area. So with people you're not familiar with.
I'm sorry, there was a thought that's been kind of just in my head when y'all were talking about kind of social media, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if the way we're using social media now is much different than before, and is actually we're being forced to use social media to connect with people, to truly connect with people now. As before, I think it was very different, right? I don't think social media was used to truly connect authentically with folks. But yeah, so
it was more promotional, right? It was more promotional. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel you.
Yeah.
Should we do these questions from the audience?
Yeah, I was going to say we have some questions about social media there as well. So I love that we had a chance to talk about that, anonymous attendee. Thank you for that. There's Leslie Ward, Julian Son, a couple other people have questions here I'm going to try to get to. We're going to start with this one. So as artists in an environment where so many of us are ripe for exploitation by organizations habituated to throw artists at the toughest problems, violence against marginalized groups, economic disinvestment, etc., without adequate compensation, what are you all doing to stay afloat, stay healthy, while continuing to speak truth to power? And just in the interest of time, you can keep this answer nice and tidy for me.
For me, I've been working on selling a script about queer high school kids, and it's been an extremely gratifying experience just to have people respond to the scripts in the way that they have, and also to have a sense that in the future, some kids will see this and feel like, oh my goodness. First of all, this was all sort of being pitched during COVID, but it happened because I think it will get sold and made. I'm just excited to be a part of something that's hopefully, I'm not really answering the question. I'm not really mitigating anyone's harm in doing this beyond the kids whose families will see this and hopefully see them as more human and give them more space to be themselves. But, you know, we're being very aware of the fact that we cannot go to set. I think that's very clear for us, right, Wilson? We cannot go to sets until we are, I think Tyler Perry has proposed some idea of eventually, once production does pick up again, we're going to be quarantined with the crew. Actors will be quarantined with the crew for 14 days. They can't go home. They'll do the work. I don't know when that's going to happen or how soon that's realistic for us in LA, but.
Well, I think you would quarantine for 2 weeks before. Oh, you're saying, you can't go home during production. You're talking about during production.
This is in Tyler Perry land, whatever his.
Oh, yeah. Well, because he owns houses that are.
They test you, right. They test you. You stay on the lot with the crew. So everyone is dealing with it. So they created a new cluster, essentially. And then they go to work and they're tested every day at work as well, at least temperature reading and stuff. So those are the ideas I've heard in terms of continuing to be productive artistically and mitigating that harm. But beyond that, for myself, I'm figuring out ways to continue to be productive artistically for the future. So.
Scott, did you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when this all happened and I lost all my gigs, I was like, man, I didn't think I was this vulnerable. I'm so tired of being this vulnerable. And that's the conversation that I'm seeing artists having. You know, I think it's less about what art are we making right now, but it's about what is the clarity that we're getting here. And I think that question was very spot on. I think it came from Leslie. I think I knew who asked that question. And I think all of this is causing us to look at the structures of power, which are economic structures. And again, that silver lining is, could we possibly flip that? And so for artists who have been so intensely impacted by this, for us to think like, how can, you know, if they don't have a theater, if I don't show up, you know what I mean? Like, right? Like, or whatever, you know what I mean?
I mean, the whole economy is experiencing that right now, right? Like they can't, the billionaires can't make their money if the poor people don't go to work. Now we're seeing the power that poor people have in terms of they have to step up and take care of us, right? This is not.
Well, but here's, you know, that's not happening in the way
collective demands, I think. Yeah.
Well, this is probably why, you know, there's I mean, there's this whole argument, and this is, I mean, we have literally 2 minutes left, but there's this, it's part of the reason why certain states and certain organizations are opening before they're meeting any of the recommended guidelines to do so, because you have to put, to your point, Darrell, you got to put the poor people back to work so that the rich folks in power can continue to make their money. And like, that's speaking truth to power, by the way. And I think we just have to continue to unite. We have to continue to strike. We have to continue to support each other. We have to continue to do the things like one of the questions here. And Scott, you brought this up. I think this was great. Or Hugh, about flipping social media. I feel like everyone's social media here who I've seen, we're trying to do that. Things like this are giving us an opportunity to sort of flip social media, flip this world, and understand that we do, because of our mass, if anything, but because of our shared experiences, we have the power with that. And I just, speaking of power and enabling people, you know, I want to give Rob Mellon, who I introduced at the beginning of this, kind of an opportunity to speak really quick for those watching, just a little bit about what APAIT is doing in the last minute before we get out of here, Rob.
Yeah, so on behalf of APAIT, my name is Rob Mellon. I am the board chair. I want to thank our panelists for sharing your story. It's been truly a good time for me watching and hearing about your each different perspective. So thank you. Also want to thank James for being an excellent moderator. As you all know, APAIT relies on donors to keep its programs like this Zoom panel, residential housing for its clients, mental health services, and HIV programs. So I know it's hard right now, but if you're able to donate, please visit apaitonline.org. And again, I want to thank the panel for everything that you do. Thank you.
So, you know, if I could piggyback a little bit, you know, one of the areas in our society that's really suffering at the moment are our LGBTQ nonprofits, who are really the backbone of our community and the lifeline of our community. And they were created, so many of them were created around this idea of taking care of ourselves when our government turned its back on us. And so we learned how to take care of ourselves, and we built this infrastructure within our community. And this crisis is threatening the livelihoods of everyone working at those organizations that have kept us afloat and brought us to where we are today. And so if there's anything that we have in our individual pockets that can support these LGBTQ organizations, I urge everyone to do so, especially during Pride.
Absolutely. And Wilson, you said it best. So I'm really just gonna wrap this up on a couple of things that I also want to thank all the panelists for being here, everyone who is watching and interacted with us. There are some fantastic questions here in the Q&A, and the fact that we were not able to get to all of those questions is solely 100% my responsibility, and I apologize for that. But I think we had a really lovely conversation, and so I hope individuals were also able to get out of the conversation some of your questions answered, but just also really be able to think and really be able to think about what your mental wellness and your mental health journey looks like. I know that I'm not going to speak for all of them or whatever, but every single person that you're seeing up here is very available. We are not hiding. We are not shy. You know, you might slide into some DMs and it might be a few days before you hear from someone, but if you get at someone in the comments or just reach out to folks, everyone here on this panel that you are seeing on your screen is very available. There's a reason they were here. So I didn't manage the time right to get to all of your questions, but it doesn't mean your questions can't be answered. So we are here, and please reach out to us. I also want you don't know a lot about APAIT or want to learn more, go to apaitonline.org for more information, not only about the organization, but about accessing our behavioral health and housing services if you need them. Also, we've talked about if you're feeling in crisis or overwhelmed and you need to reach out, the National Suicide Hotline is 24/7. It's 1-800-273-TALK or 273-8255. The Trans Lifeline is at translifeline.org. And the Trevor Project is available 1-866-488-7386. So I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. I'm glad we had some deep thoughts, some breathing, a little kiki. I cannot thank the panelists enough, and I especially cannot thank Jake and Jury and Vikas and Hugh and everyone, Rob, everyone involved with APAIT, the entire staff. They're fantastic. Thank all of y'all so much for being on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Amen. Bye.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Good
Thanks.
night.